Cool.
Ready to go?
Yeah, let me take a little sip of my
sip
beautiful
of
nitro cold brew.
Oh, is that what you drink? You drink cold brew coffee?
They have cold brew on tap here, man. It's silly.
Nice.
Yeah,
Fancy
it's like
stuff.
everything about this going away is so disappointing because it was literally the perfect setup for me.
Right.
So now I'll figure it out, man. But
There are other good co-working, but the podcast studio thing.
yeah, that's just it. Like, I mean, look at this thing, dude.
It's great.
Yeah,
It's
and
great.
it's a sad day. But all right, so we're ready to rock, right, Brett? Yep. Cool, man. Well, Chris Fisher of BenefitsAlly, how are you, man? Good to see you.
Doing fantastic. Thanks for inviting me to be here, Spencer.
My pleasure. You're up from Houston, right?
I am. I was here for drove up on Monday, and we had like 8 or 9 meetings over a couple of days. So I'm excited to be here and get a chance to tell our story with some benefit advisors in Dallas.
Heck yeah. And you said you took I want to hear about this Vonlane thing. You were telling me
so
about
I mentioned I drove. I technically didn't drive. So for those of you that don't know that are in Texas, there's this amazing bus service called Vonlane, Vonlane. And their tagline, at least it used to be, I think it still is, it's a private jet on wheels. Like it is the nicest bus you will ever see. It's got leather chairs. I'm almost 6 feet tall, and unlike a plane where your knees are hitting the seat in front of you, I can stretch my legs out and not hit the seat in front of me. They feed you. They got a concierge that walks by every 15 minutes with food and drinks. So like it's literally the greatest thing in the world. If you're doing,
so it's like a big, what you would think of maybe a tour bus or something like that.
It looks like a normal like Greyhound style bus, but it has big, comfortable leather chairs with Wi-Fi, and they bring around coffee and tea and Coke and pretzels, and I had a fancy chicken salad sandwich on the way down here, and it's great for. I know a lot of insurance brokers use it because I can work for 4 hours.
Yeah.
I get there, I show them my ID. I get there 10 minutes beforehand. I get on the bus. There's no TSA check. There's no, dropping bags off. I can work for 4 hours and get there refreshed and go. So it's fantastic.
It's probably a fraction of the cost, I would presume, as well.
It's about $100 each way. It's about what a Southwest flight costs.
But I mean, it's like a Greyhound, but you sip, with tea with your pinky up.
You can. I had tea with my pinky up, and had a chicken salad sandwich, and I had some almonds, and it's fantastic.
Well, so, I've seen the billboards before. Obviously you mentioned it's a regional. Austin, I think Houston, Texas, probably San Antonio.
It's basically all the big Austins, all the big Texas cities: Austin, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas. They just added Oklahoma City.
I was gonna say they probably added Oklahoma to the mix.
It's fantastic.
I need to check it out just for the the story to tell. I got to ask you too though. Over COVID, we talked about these flowing locks that have been growing, man. So you just started growing it out one day, and you're like, you know what? I kind of like this, or what? Like, what happened?
I mean, it's funny. In the early days of COVID, we really didn't know. I mean, I was joking with somebody else. The early days of COVID, we were putting like Amazon packages on our back porch, letting them air out because we thought the virus was living on my groceries. But yeah, so I let it grow. I think a lot of people, let the hair grow out early during COVID, and I let it keep going. And a few months ago, a couple people made a comment, said, "Chris, you look 10 years younger." And considering I just turned 40, I was like, I'll take it, man. I don't have a bald spot on the back of it. It's still kind of flowing locks. So I'll let it grow. I'm sure I will cut it eventually, but I like it. Other than the fact it takes a lot longer to get ready in the morning.
It does, man.
I didn't have to blow dry my hair before. Now I have to blow dry my hair in the morning. But other than that, if
it's any consolation, I still blow dry my hair.
You do blow dry your hair.
But I used to have the locks like yours when I was playing soccer in college, and you don't realize like the upkeep, because if you want it to look halfway decent and not just like disheveled, you're almost like, are you doing like a flat iron too?
I don't flat iron.
You need to expose yourself.
Natural curl, but I did have to buy a fancy blow dryer and rock it out. So
well, good for you, man. I know that's one of the beauties of this business, and I think we were talking about Andy here beforehand as well. I do think to a degree we're getting a little less formal. I don't know if
100%.
Everything about that is great, but like me having a beard, when I was a rep for Sun Life, my presumption is I had to be clean shaven everywhere I went. If I had like a day or two of stubble, I'm like, what does this say about me? Or like what do my prospects think? Now I'm like rocking a full beard, and whether or not it's perceived the same way, I think there's a softening of the formality of our industry to a degree. And I think overall, in aggregate, that's probably a good thing. So, like, people don't say, "Oh, Chris has got flowing hair. I'm not going to do business with him."
If they thinking that, they haven't said it to me, and they keep taking meetings with me because I'm hopefully adding value. But no, you're right. I mean, when I first got in the industry, my first job was with Cigna, and I'll never forget. I came from tech, and we may talk about that in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But I went and bought a bunch of kind of more business professional clothes, and it was basically all white and all light blue shirts. That was it.
That's the insurance
the idea
uniform.
of having a purple and pink check shirt would have been insane when I was getting into this. And you're right. I mean, wear suits and ties and whatever. I haven't worn a tie and I couldn't tell you how long.
Yeah, me neither.
I mean, I've had business meetings in jeans. I'm tempted to go order some like quarter zip pullovers with BenefitsAlly logo and just travel with those. Like no suit jackets, just casual, jeans or whatever. I think fundamentally, I think people hopefully want to do business with people based on your intellectual capital, what's between your ears, not how nice, you have a lovely, suit jacket and pocket square on right now, but
that's just for the podcast.
Right. Just for the podcast. But I mean, I think fundamentally we're reaching that. And I think COVID has definitely accelerated.
Well, and I was introduced to the idea of kind of dressing a little more casual, but you talked about branding. When I was at Hayes Companies, they had kind of colored branded polos. They had this whole palette of colors that they utilized, and they would wear those polos on meetings. I'm like, well, this is kind of cool. Like they're branding themselves, but also they're kind of not overwhelming, because they had manufacturing clients or municipal clients. They're not overwhelming them with this like suit and tie and 3-piece suit and pocket square. And you're like, hey, we're not meeting at the same level necessarily in this conversation. So I appreciate it. Again, I like throwing on a jacket and stuff like that for the right occasion. But I think overall, I think it's a good thing that people are allowed to be themselves a little bit more.
I 100% agree. I mean, I think just, I don't think anybody wakes up and goes, if you love to wear a tie or, you love to, do your hair, put on makeup, whatever, more power to you. But the idea that stuff, I think is expected.
Is required,
the fact that it's going away, I think is a good thing. And let people be comfortable, right? I mean, at the end of the day, to me, I'm always my best self when I'm the most comfortable, in your own skin.
But I'll draw the line at like Lululemon pants or something in the meeting. Like, let's have some standard, and not to say that that's happened, but I feel like, with the virtual realm nowadays, like people might have a button up on top, but then basketball shorts underneath.
I guarantee you there were people, myself included, who were on Zoom calls who had basketball shorts on. Yeah. I mean, I had a meeting in Houston. I'm like, I won't throw the guy under the bus, but I walked in. I was in jeans and like a golf shirt. I was pretty casual. He walked in with jeans, a t-shirt, and shorts on for a lunch meeting, and it was like, he didn't care.
Flip-flops.
Flip-flops. Be casual, man. Be yourself. Again, people are working with you because of what you know, what you can do. Your skills are not working with you because you got nice shoes on.
100%. Well, so that's a good segue into kind of like who you are, right? So you mentioned tech, you mentioned kind of a Cigna in the background. I'd love to hear a snippet of your story of what brought you to BenefitsAlly, all that stuff. So give me some of your background, Chris, so people know who you are.
Yeah, so I was born in Houston, Texas. My dad was in the employee benefits industry for his entire career. So he graduated from the University of Texas, 22, went to work for Great West. So he was, from the time I was born, he was always in the employee benefits kind of arena. Like most guys, started working on the wholesale side, then transitioned to the retail side, being kind of a retail broker, consultant, advisor. So I grew up, I think by the time I was born, all my memories, he was on the retail side as a broker, now consultant, advisor. Broker, I feel like is a dirty word for a lot of people.
I feel like the industry is moving away from that terminology, right? It's semantics. It means the same thing, but I feel like that's like we're trying to shed the skin of a broker.
Yeah, the broker. Yeah, I don't think many people call themselves brokers anymore, but that was a term for decades.
Of course,
right?
yeah.
So I was exposed to it. I always liked it. It was interesting. So I went to school in Austin College. Go Kangaroos. So it's about an hour north of where we're sitting right now.
Sherman, right?
Sherman, Texas. Yeah, small liberal arts college. The high school I went to was 3 times as big as my college. So my college was like 1,300 students. My high school was 5A, 3,000, students. So it was kind of a different dynamic. And I graduated with a business degree, honors in economics. And I knew I wanted to do sales. I always liked kind of sales, business development, talking with people. And I kind of wanted to get into the employee benefits arena. This was back in 2004. The problem was at that time, there were really no jobs for new people coming to the industry right out of college.
Okay.
At the time, and I think they've started back up again now. I know certain brokers do a lot of them. I think carriers do too. But, when my dad graduated, all these carriers would have basically new hire training. They go to group school for, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or a year. They would train you in all this stuff. Well, at the time I graduated, those schools just didn't exist. It was the carriers would just pick off reps from other carriers, and you jump from Cigna to Prudential to Unum to whatever at United Healthcare. So there were no opportunities for it. So I ended up getting a referral, and I went to go work for Dell. I did corporate sales for Dell. I started basically doing small business sales, and ultimately started doing enterprise, relatively decent-sized deals. Hundreds of thousands of dollars every single month, and it was great. Did really well.
Was this the time when the Dude, You're Getting Adele was like popular.
I was thinking about that. Yeah, the blonde guy, like, Dude, You're Getting Adele. I think that was right before.
Okay.
I think that guy was right before. It was about the same time though.
You talk about a SweetGig, a great like iconic, like he was a character, right? And this young
100%.
guy, then he gets busted for weed, I think is the story or something, and loses his whole like his whole career was destroyed. Yeah, it's too bad. But anyways,
it was great training. It was a lot of fun. It was a very casual environment, and it was great. I mean, I made good money. It was a fun environment. I worked my way up. I was doing kind of enterprise server storage, networking gear, and it was a lot of fun. I think right near the end, I won like the top. I forgot what they called it, like Circle of Excellence or whatever the thing was. They shipped all the top reps out to Puerto Rico, and it was great. And
cool.
About that time, Cigna started their group school back up. So I basically, I think my dad found out, because my dad was, again, a retail advisor at that point, heard that they were hiring reps again. He was like, Chris, you ought to apply if you want to get into it. Like, now's the time to do it. So,
well, talk to me about group school, because that's something that I've heard as a term. I never got to go to group school.
Yeah.
People talk about, I trained at group school, and it's actually one of the reasons why I started the stop loss videos is like, I didn't have a school to teach me stop loss. I learned on the job, and it's like, well, maybe I can be the school for people and help accelerate some of that learning curve. So tell me what group school actually is.
So, again, my perception of groups was only based on my experience with Cigna. So I think at the time this was the medical side of Cigna. So it's not the life or DI stop loss side. This was the medical side, and I think, and I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was called SOAR. It was like Sales, Optimization, Acquisition, and Retention. It was some typical very big Fortune 500 acronym.
Like soar like an eagle.
Yeah, soar like an eagle thing.
Gosh.
And, so I interviewed, got hired, and they shipped us off to Bloomfield. I think it was Bloomfield, Connecticut, somewhere in Connecticut, in January, which, as a good Southern guy who grew up in Texas where it's 90 degrees 8 months of the year, being in Connecticut in January was interesting. I'll put it that way. It was freezing. Freezing is a good word.
Freezing is the right word. Yeah.
But it was good. I mean, it was not. It was about I think it was about a month long. It was maybe it's a little more than that. Maybe it was a month or two long. It was not an incredibly long group school. Okay. I think other group schools were a lot longer.
But that's still a month. Is a significant amount of time.
And it was 8 hours a day, and they bring in underwriters and actuaries and sales reps, and we do sample pitches, and we kind of go through the whole 9 yards. This was back when HSAs and like HDHPs, consumer driven healthcare, was a hot new thing that we were all getting trained on. And it was really good. It was, I think I came into it with more of a background and knowledge only because I was exposed to it my entire life going into it. And I was also, not that I was old at that point, I was a 40-year-old, it's like 24, but I was also been in the real world for a couple of years where everyone else was typically right out of college. It was 22-year-olds and I was 24, 25 at the time. So I had a little bit more like job life experience at that point, but it was good. I mean, we got the basic understanding about, hey, what are manual rates, what are deductibles, co-insurance, just basic stuff to try and, hopefully set you up for success because, as a group rep, and I have a ton of empathy for the group reps that are out there that are listening, it's brutal when you go out there and you're cold calling on brokers who've been doing it for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years and, have forgotten more than in your entire life. And, you're getting beat up at some level. So,
why do you think they moved away from like that organized and formal training? Because it's a no-brainer to me to do it. I don't know if the cost of training people was so high and losing them, but I mean, it seems weird that like there is no formal training in insurance, at least in mass nowadays. Why do you think that is?
The thing that I've heard is cost, and I think it's the same thing too. I just came up with a broker I talked to, a guy who runs multiple states for a top 10 firm. He said there's a huge gap of people, and this was several years ago, kind of in that like 35 to 45 range, kind of right in our age band, where a lot of people where those training programs just disappeared for a while. And so it was like, we'll just pick them off. We'll hire them from one firm to another, and it caused salaries to go great, higher and higher and higher, which is great if you're in
that range.
You're in that range. Yeah. But the comment he made, and this is on the broker side, but the carrier side too, said it was tough because you'd have people that were in their 50s and 60s and 70s that were looking to transition out of the business, and they need to pass that business off to somebody. But you need to pass it to somebody who's been doing it long enough, has a little bit of credibility, a little bit of maybe silver in their hair, whatever. You can't. It's hard to pass off whether you're a broker or a carrier, pass off a large client, large firm, large relationship to somebody who's been doing it a week and a half or 6 months, because they're going to get eaten for lunch, unfortunately, until you build those scars up and say that I know what I'm doing.
Well, and so just to your point, we've had personal experience with PlanSite, and I won't say who or where, but like we're training people on benefits while we're training them on the system, because they're picking off just super green young individuals, which is great that they're getting the opportunity. But I mean, like they're also responsible for transcribing benefits and knowing the difference in certain benefits, and they're learning as they go.
Elimination period.
Yeah, and it's like you can't expect somebody to understand that 2 months on the job. So it's just kind of interesting that there's a generational shift. I'm always kind of creating content when it's kind of technical content towards the newbie, because it's like there is no education for the newbie. You just have to find it yourself. And I would rather, hell, maybe one day I'll do a stop loss school and like go invite people to learn stop loss in person. But it's like, who's training people on stop loss? Nobody's training people on stop loss.
I think it's tough. I think the challenge for just training in general, this is not insurance specific, I think this is a lot of broad industries, is that training is, I think there are a couple things that are interesting about that. Training is an expense. And I think also because there's so much turnover in the job market, right? I think that's one of the other things. Like, well, why do we want to invest a ton of money in training this person when they're going to leave 12, 18, 24 months down the road? And to some level, I understand that, but I think unless, as an industry, no matter what industry it is, whether you're a carrier or a broker or whatever, unless you're training people, just the backfill for people as people naturally age out and retire and leave the business is going to be really tough. So,
well, outsource it to me. I'll do it for a fraction of the cost. You heard it here. All right. So you said your dad was in the industry. I want to ask you though, like you growing up and seeing him, and did it attract you? You said you were trying to find a job and you couldn't early on in that space, but did you know you wanted to get into insurance in some form?
I don't, again, I'm getting old, man. Memories get bad.
I feel you.
But I think so. It appealed to me, because he owned his own firm, right? He was he like most people, he started into, he worked for somebody else, and at a certain point he decided, I'm going to do my own thing. Left, built a
what was the name of his firm? Do you remember?
Yeah, no, absolutely. His firm was Benefit Specialist. I actually worked with him for a while.
Did you?
Okay, but yeah, I was exposed to it. I liked it. I thought it seemed like a really fun, kind of gig. He, had a fair amount of, he had free time, right? He could come to, my tennis games growing up. We had a place in the hill country. Like, it wasn't like he was having to work constantly. He made his own schedule, et cetera. And I was joking I saw a guy who runs Gallagher in a different state. I saw him in Kansas City a few weeks ago. And I still remember this to this day. This guy was a Prudential rep 20 years ago now, more than 20 years ago. And I'll never forget, we got to get like not courtside, but like 3 rows up, like amazing tickets to go see the Rockets back when the Rockets were really good. Back when Akeem Elijah, one of those guys. I was like, wow. So my dad gets to do this. The guys take him out to go to sporting events. Like, this is awesome. Like, I want to go do this. And the interesting thing is now I think the business, most people probably agree, is a lot more stressed and probably less fun than it used to be 20, 30, 40 years ago. Just in the amount of work
I had the perception you like brokers play golf and prospect and play golf, and really like that was the extent of their job. Like, and that's not to be demeaning, but you did have this perception like, hey, they got so much free time once they build a block of business, and they just get to go do fun things and entertain clients, and you're like, that's an alluring profession to consider to get into.
When was the last time? You and I have been doing this. I think we said we're about the same age, or pretty close to the same age. I play golf occasionally. I'm a mediocre golfer at best. But when was the last time you got to go play 4 or 5 hours with a broker for golf?
Well, I'm literally a terrible golfer and have never golfed, the exception of high school. So 0 time. I'm the bad person.
You're a bad
ask.
Example.
But a sporting event, happy hour, maybe we'll get a lunch has been more prevalent.
Lunch
the last that really seems to be the level of entertainment. Unless it's a long-standing client with you have a lot of business with, then expense like in a sporting event or a trip or something might make sense.
It's so much time, right? Again, I remember after I left Cigna, I went to go work with my dad for a few years and decided I didn't want to do that and long term. But it's just the amount of stuff that advisors have to do now compared to what they had to do even 20 years ago. I even think about I was talking about the ACA when the ACA happened back in, I don't know,
8?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think it's
something around that. Maybe 9, 10. But we thought that was going to just radically change. Well, now ACA is just commonplace. But now about everything from stop loss, and you have to be a pharmacy expert and bin tech administration. Where 20, 30, 40 years ago it was a lot simpler than it is now. I think it's still a phenomenal industry, but it's a lot of work.
I would say it's more complicated, which is why people are pushing themselves more to the terminology or nomenclature of a consultant than a broker.
Advisor.
You do have, we see it every day. We talk to other vendors and point solutions that fit inside of our platform, but every single day there's something new and innovative that sounds cool. It's like, how do you sift through all of these things in addition to where most of your focus is on medical, right?
Yep.
Let's be honest. Then you get to dental, vision, life, disability, worksite products, etc. Then you're like, hey, this point solution or this bin admins. I mean, like, my goodness, there's 50 different things you have to understand for one single client. And so I do agree with you that it's a lot more sophisticated business nowadays, which probably speaks to why it's a lot less like, hey, I'm just going to go golf and make a lot of money. It's a little different nowadays.
Can't do that anymore, yeah.
No, so I know you said you spent some time in the tech space. Tell me about, were you selling, you sold computers, but then you said you were like some sort of kind of call center or, tell me.
Yeah, so excuse me. In the tech world, so I had a couple careers in the tech world. I worked for Dell, and then I also worked for a big software company called VMware, which ironically sold to EMC, which sold to Dell, and now is a separate company again. But anyway, I've spent several years in tech, and in the tech world, this is kind of pre-insurance, but a lot of the tech world, it's all sold virtually, right? I mean, the idea that you have to knock on someone's door and shake their hand and sell them, a network storage array or some software. There were some field sales reps, but it's rare. You were spending, if you were a Fortune 500 firm and you were spending hundreds of millions of dollars, you would often get field kind of presence. But for a lot of the deals that I was selling, which were still, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, it was all virtual. Yeah. So it was, email, it was phone calls. These were pre-Zoom days. Okay. I think we used WebEx, and for that kind of stuff. But it was all kind of telephone based, and it was a mix of kind of inbound and outbound. But I think it's one of the reasons I've gotten, I think, pretty good. I still do a lot of cold calls and a lot of phone-based selling because I was forced to do it from the early days of my career. When you're trying to, close a $90,000 software PO and they can't see, you can't see them. You have to be really good about the words you use, your tone, everything else like that to try and convey that comfort level, which I think has served me well, especially in the last couple of years with COVID, when it was all virtual selling. So, and the tech thing, it was interesting when I worked for Dell and I went to go started my career with Cigna. Didn't last very long at Cigna for reasons we'll talk about. When I was at Dell, tech is very high paced, right? I mean, I would be closing 6-8 new deals a day, be issuing probably 20, 30 quotes a day. Like, it was high velocity. And so when I came over to Cigna, got out of group school, they sent me down to Houston to be in their, what they considered small business at the time, which I think was 51 to 250. Okay. And I was the 4th rep at the time. And as anyone who's listening knows, who's ever been in the group rep world, when you're the new rep, you get kind of the dregs of the other brokers that nobody else wants. Yeah. So I got I did not get the high producing brokers. I'll put it that way. And so I went from issuing 30 quotes a day and to getting like 4 RFPs a month. Like, it was I was bored out of my mind. Yeah. And unfortunately at the time, Cigna did not have the most competitive medical products. So the decline to quote ratio was like 90+%. Yeah. And when I'm coming from the world of Dell, like, if someone calls and needs something, I don't ever go, decline to quote this. Like, the idea of decline to quote was like a foreign concept. Like, what do you mean you decline to quote? Like, well, we're not competitive. And I knew what that stuff meant, but I was just like, I was bored out of my mind. Yeah. And I mean, it was so bad where I was just like, I was sitting at home watching The Price is Right because I'd had nothing to do. And I would talk to my boss about it. I would keep pounding the phone. I was like, these guys have no business. Like, I can't call the same guy 4 times in a week. Like, hey, I know I talked to you yesterday. Anything new happened today? Yeah,
did you get to close a client today by any chance?
Did you happen to pick up a new 200 employee group I can quote you since I talked to you 7 hours ago?
Well, you bring up a really interesting point. Like, people that haven't never been in the rep world don't quite understand all the obstacles to a sale, right? So, Decline ratio, I had a decline ratio of 50 to 60% depending on the territory when I was selling stop loss. You're looking at close ratio, maybe 3 to 5% is like a stellar close ratio. Sure. So do the math. 3 sales out of 100 RFPs. So really all you're really trying to do is how many RFPs can I drum, and the numbers will work themselves out over time. And if you're stellar, maybe you'll get an extra % or 2 that you close. But it's a weird thing when you have a willing buyer, but you're representing a seller who's not willing to sell. Like, and it's not like, hey, you know, we're off by a couple points. It's like, I don't even want that. Like, I can't even touch that. I'm not even going to quote, like you said. That's a weird thing, declining to even quote on a piece of business.
Well, and I think part of it too, and this is just by virtue of insurance. And again, the medical side is, I mean, insurance in general is rate driven, right? I mean, I know you come from the ancillary world, stop loss. That's very rate driven.
Of course it is. Yeah.
You know, medical, fully insured premiums. You know, there are other things like network, and you can make arguments about service or whatever, but it's still, insurance is still a very rate-driven thing.
Yes.
And I get it at some level. It's like, well, Chris, if our manual rates were going to be 23% higher than their renewal, like, why even bother issuing a quote? They're not going to buy us anyway. And I get that at some level, but it's like, you're not even giving me the opportunity to put this sales training to use, like, you know, extolling all the amazing virtues that we offer for this carrier. So it was frustrating, and I knew kind of very quickly, even when I went to go work for Cigna, I think the plan always was to go do this for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then join my dad at his firm.
Yeah.
And he knew how frustrated I was, and he was like, well, let's just accelerate the timetable a little bit and go do it.
So what'd you do for him? What was your role at his firm?
I think my technical title was like innovation, you know, officer. I mean, we were selling. I mean, we definitely sold, you know, sold business. I mean, you know, I remember our first client was IMS, which is like a mortgage servicing company. You know, and we sold it, and we sold new business. And I mean, I was basically, I mean, he was not a one-man shop. He was one producer shop, like a lot of boutique guys. And then he obviously had service and client managers teams that he worked with. So yeah, I mean, it was new business production, but it also became a lot of not client management, but just going on all the meetings and kind of having a different perspective. And I actually think it worked really well. Clients liked it because we wouldn't butt heads. We'd have different perspectives about how to do things. It was almost like you're getting kind of 2 consultants for the price of 1 deal.
Yeah, a good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, good cop, bad cop kind of thing. And it was really good, but I think, you know, I enjoyed parts of it a lot. I love that. What I really did like about it was I like the in-person interaction, right? Having come from the tech world where it was all virtual to sitting across the table from someone, shaking their hand, having a conversation like you and I are having right now. I love that. And I love, you know, having to think on my feet and just respond to that stuff. But I also realized at the time, you know, it was a boutique agency, and I also did not, I think, want to have ultimately any kind of management responsibility. I mean, you know, running a business, that's just funny now that I run my own company. But, you know, the idea of running your own company, being responsible for, you know, payroll and other people's livelihoods, right? I mean, the idea of, I mean, he didn't have a giant staff, but he had 5 people, I guess, who worked for him at the time, 5 or 6. And, you know, the idea that, you know, I'm responsible for their, like, welfare. I can't just decide one day, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore and just close up shop.
Well, and at that size, too, you intimately know everybody that works with. It's not like you have 5,000 employees and you're like, employee 7452 is not doing well and I have to let him go. Like, you know the people that you work for and work with. So that's 100%. A totally different ballgame.
And a lot of them, I mean, my dad, you know, the people that he had working from, the 2 main people anyway, had worked with him for 20 plus years. So they'd known me when I was like 7 years old. So it was also a really interesting dynamic. And they respected me a lot. I mean, I remember my dad would go on vacation. He'd be like, don't call me, don't email me. Like, I trust you guys implicitly to do it. And I remember one time, I forgot what the issue was, but something blew up with a client. And, you know, even though they'd been doing it for like 30 years and I'd been doing it for like 8 months, they're like, Chris, like, what do we do? What do we do?
Yeah.
And, you know, we took care of it and it was fine and we got it all resolved. But, you know, the idea of just running that and feeling like I'm obligated to kind of continue that, I think just scared me a little bit.
Okay.
And I decided I didn't want to do it, and that was okay. And he respected my kind of decisions, you know, to do that. And
was that the genesis then of BenefitsAlly? Was that the time frame?
It was around that time. Okay. So you know, when I left BenefitsAlly, or when I left, you know, Benefit Specialist, I went to go work for an enrollment firm for a while, and I did a few different things. But the genesis for BenefitsAlly was around that time, and it was essentially this idea that there is so much innovation happening in employee benefits. There are all these cool little like boutique-ish companies that most brokers had never heard of before. And ironically, it came up because Benefit Specialist at the time was a member firm of NFP. NFP has member firms like UBA and Assurex Global do, where you kind of roll up and get some resources. And anyway, I was part of I got invited to be a part of a professional study group where we would get together once a quarter and just talk about best practices, what's working, what's not working, whatever. And I would kept coming across these cool, interesting ideas. I was like, these are amazing programs. Like, how does nobody know these things exist? And I was like, there's got to be a way to kind of help, bring these ideas to a broader market. And the funny thing was, this was back in 2009, 10. Like, the amount of innovation happening in 2010 compared to the amount of innovation happening in 2021 is orders of magnitude greater. But that was the whole idea. It was that there was cool companies like, RX and Go and Teladoc and CRX International. They were just doing interesting stuff. And I was like, this is crazy. How do these companies not know they exist? So that was the genesis of it.
So you identified a gap in knowledge in the marketplace. You knew those things were out there, but nobody really pulled them together to help pitch them or market them or position them. Like, when did you know, hey, I could do something to help these folks?
So it was, I think, the year. I was working on Benefit. I don't know what the year was, but it was probably around 2008, 2009, somewhere in that vein. I can have the early ideas of BenefitsAlly. And a good friend of mine called me one day, said, Chris, I'm at VMware now, which is a giant software company, one of the largest software companies in the world, and said, Chris, we need reps at VMware. Do you want to get back into tech? And at that point, I had BenefitsAlly, like an idea. In fact, I remember this now. I literally had just filed like an entity and a tax ID number. So I had like an idea and a tax ID number and nothing else.
Yeah, okay.
And he was like, well, if you want to go interview at VMware, come on by. And I was like, sure, I'll take it, or I'll interview.
Yeah.
And interviewed, went well. They made me an offer, and I took it. But I was still working on kind of BenefitsAlly behind the scenes at the time. They put me in charge of the Silicon Valley, so I had some huge clients. It was a lot of fun. I was doing really, really well. But I kept working on it. And in the early days of BenefitsAlly, we had this kind of idea of this platform that we called DOM. At the time, it was basically Data Opportunity Money. And the idea was that we would basically extract a bunch of claims data from a broker, run it through this analytics system, and then come back with this really pretty report that would say, hey, based on the data, here are like 3 or 4 or 5 cool programs that you might want to consider implementing.
Yeah.
And here's kind of the data to back it up. It was bodged together with Xywave and a few other stuff on the back. And there's tools now that do it much better. But this was, again, a decade ago. And I started talking about that to some brokers, and I pitched it. I won't say who it was, but I pitched it to one of the larger brokers in Texas at the time. On my lunch break, I went out there, and they had a lot of flexibility. So I went out there and pitched it, and I'll never forget, there were 8 guys in the room, and one of the guys looked at me, and I've known this guy for like, look, it's Chris, I love this idea. And I heard later from their practice leader, a couple of consultants, it was like, if this person said that, that's a big deal, because he's always the guy, like the last person to do anything. He's always very concerned. He's like, the fact that he said this is a good idea, I like it, is like, means you've got something here.
Okay.
So I was like, okay. So now I got to figure out what I'm going to do. And I kept rolling. And as benefits, I started a little bit of traction. I was getting ready to get promoted at VMware, and I went to my boss and I said, hey, here's a deal. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I've got this thing here. You're going to potentially promote me. Like, I don't want to take this promotion and then quit 30 days later. Like, I want to do you right. And he's like, Chris, I appreciate the honesty. You need to go chase this. If it doesn't work out, call me. I'll hire you back in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And that was 10 years ago. So.
Well, it's that idea, you can't serve 2 masters, right? If you wanted BenefitsAlly to flourish, you couldn't have had your feet, straddling the line of both jobs. And it's cool that you actually had a boss that was like encouraging you to do it rather than scaring you out of it, because that happens sometimes. Somebody will instill the fear in you. No, that's never going to work. You shouldn't do that. I've got something on the table for you that's better for you. That's good that he actually encouraged you, or she encouraged you to go do that. Very cool.
They were great.
Yeah, very cool. So that was what I think 2012, at least on LinkedIn, was where that maybe it started, or roughly
something
in that,
around that time. Yeah.
How has it evolved? Oh, your original idea to now, and then I want to touch 3 by 3 by 3 here in a second. But how has it morphed over the last few years?
So a couple things. I mean, we don't do the data analysis anymore just because there are other amazing tools who do that. But a lot of it just evolved into trying to help benefit advisors quickly and easily learn about this stuff. I think one of the things that I've always been really good at, whether it was in the tech world or benefits world, is trying to get to the point and do it direct and do it quickly. As my dad said, taking the complex and making it simple, right? The benefits world and tech, for that matter, are full of often very complex things. And a lot of times people have a really hard time taking something complex and making it simple and easy to understand and easy to digest. And I think that's something, frankly, I'm pretty good at. And I think that's one of the reasons I've cultivated a pretty healthy network. I think last time I checked, there's something like 9,000, benefit advisors that we work with, kind of connected with in some various capacity. Some obviously are better than others, but I think you want to reach the point where these guys kind of trust me to say, Chris brings cool ideas to the table. Like every time I sit down with Chris, he's adding value. One of my favorite compliments I got from a guy in Austin about 4 months ago, I reached out to him and said, hey, I'm coming, Kevin, I'm coming to Austin. And he told me when we sat down, he said, I want to pay you a compliment. He said, every time I meet you, I walk away smarter. You're going to teach me something, some program, something cool. I'm going to walk away smarter knowing that when I meet with you, it's going to be worth my time. And he said, I'll tell you, to a compliment, he said, every time you call me and tell me you're in town, I will move things to the greatest extent I possibly can to meet with you versus other people. Client, I get it. I'm not going to move a client meeting or whatever. But he's like, I move something to meet with you because I know I'm going to walk away smarter, having learned something. You're going to show me about 2 cool new ideas I've never heard of before that you found somehow, and that's
well, so they need that though. I mean, that's like you're almost like a wholesaler for ideas in a sense because we talked about how much noise is out there. I had this conversation with Janice Brunson from Epic a few weeks back.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and she's great. But I was like, I even asked her, I was like, how do you sift through the vendor? How do you vet? We're a vendor at the end of the day, but how do you sift through noise? How do you find out the ones that are actually worth a listen, the ones that are going to create a tangible ROI, and how many are just marketing fluff, right? And so you're doing, it sounds like, a lot of that triaging for them in a sense, like you've learned about them, you've kind of vetted them to a degree, whether you obviously aren't using all of the solutions, but you're doing the legwork for them, and then out of the maybe 100 that you look at, you're bringing 2 or 3 or 4 to the table that are appropriate for that broker. There's value there.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I think that the vetting thing, when people always say vetting, like I understand that term, but I also hate that term at some level because, and I'll when I push brokers back on this, say, well, have you vetted this? I said, well, what does vetting mean? Like if I polled 20 people who are listening to this podcast, what do you want to vet when you're dealing with a vendor? I would get 20 different answers about, there are some people who want to see 5 years of financials. They want to have reference. And there are other guys that are like bleeding edge. Like, I don't care. I'll be their first client.
Exactly.
So, and that was kind of the genesis, and we'll transition to the 3x3x3. But, my whole thing was, are you doing something in the early days of BenefitsAlly, it was, are you doing something interesting that solves a problem? Interesting, solves a problem, and has a track record of success. Whatever track record means. I mean, they've got a handful of clients. It seems to be working. They like it. But the hard thing, and kind of where this has evolved, is I've tried to take a little bit of a step back of just saying, look, I want to ultimately be like this giant marketplace of ideas, because I don't want to, even though I might really love a certain TPA, RBP vendor, PBM, whatever, it's kind of arrogant of me to say, well, this is the best vendor in this space, because, even though I might like it, I guarantee I could find 10 brokers on my network who think that is the most awful company in the world. I can't believe you like those guys, and vice versa. And that was kind of the genesis behind the whole, or part of the genesis behind 3x3x3 is let's put the information out there and let people decide if they've got an interesting story to tell and where they want to invest their time.
Well, no, and I appreciate that as well. Like we don't go in the weeds of, this incredible vetting process and due diligence for every vendor that maybe comes our way. Like our job is to be agnostic, kind of similar to you. I might say, hey, this is a cool idea and let's decide to add them to the platform. But ultimately it's up to that organization to service it well and provide exemplary experiences. I don't do that. We stay completely neutral in that regard. But, to your point, there's still a level of tangibility to the idea itself. This is solving a problem. This should work in theory, at least the way that the story that you're telling me. And then ultimately it takes maybe some of those more bleeding edge, more innovative brokers to say, I'll adopt it. I'll try it. I'll be the first. Sometimes there's value in being a guinea pig, because if it does work, all of a sudden you look like a rock star
100%.
And you have something new to talk about as well that a lot of your competitors are not.
And I think a part of it, and I've always been kind of a little bit more of a bleeding edge guy, because I think it's also just about being transparent with your clients, saying, look, this is bleeding edge. This is new. This could not work.
Yeah.
But if it does work, here's the benefit to you. And then just, let's make an informed decision together. It's like, is this worth, leaping a little bit, jumping off this cliff and hoping the parachute, is going to be there to catch you. So yeah, I think, and that goes back to, it's okay, right? If you want to be that bleeding edge guy, that's fine. If you want to be a little bit more conservative, that's okay. And there are various kind of things in the middle. And again, whatever solution you're looking at, TPAs or TPAs and PBMs are common ones. Again, I could pull 10 brokers and I'll have 10 different favorite TPAs or PBMs
for
different reasons.
Discussion them doesn't mean obviously you endorse them, right? At the
100%.
end of the day, and I totally get. We obviously steer clear of endorsing anybody as well because we don't want a semblance of favoritism. Like being in our platform, the entire thing is predicated on agnosticism about our vendors, right? You choose as the expert what's best. We'll bring things to the table. You decide ultimately what's best for your client. We stay out of it 100%.
Yeah. Completely agree.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
But so that leads us to 3x3x3, right? We talked about the evolution of BenefitsAlly. Mm-hmm. You're obviously taking advantage of the medium of LinkedIn and utilizing the podcast format for a platform. But you take an interesting approach in that it's very succinct, it's very to the point, and it's a bite-sized way to tell a story. So tell me about 3x3x3.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit of this before, but I'm all about being direct to the point, trying to make the complex simple. And one of the things that was constantly frustrating for me is that vendors would come in and go, I want 30 minutes to explain my diabetes program, my meditation program, my mental health program. I'm like, you're out of your mind. Like, if you think a broker wants to spend 30 minutes talking about your program, you're insane. And this is part of the reason why I have vendors all the time like, Chris, why don't you do more webinars? I was like, I have never met a broker in my life. And if you are that broker, I'll break the fourth wall now. Comment and call me out on it. But I've never met a broker that's like, you know what? I'm really bored today. I hope someone invites me to a 30-minute webinar. I am waiting for that person to call me out and say, Chris, you're full of it. So the whole idea behind 3x3x3 is I talked to a bunch of brokers. I said, look, what are the things you care about? Like if a vendor is cold calling you, like what are the things you want to know? And we heard a bunch of different answers, but it ultimately boiled down to three things. What do you do? Like, what is it? What is PlanSight? What is whatever? How are you different? Because a lot of these vendors, whether you're a TPA, PBM, diabetes, mental health, whatever, financial wellness, like how are you different? Like what makes you different than other companies in this space? And then finally, who's a good fit? If you only work in the national account space and I only do small group, I want to know that so I don't waste 30 minutes on a phone call with you, figuring out there's not a match. So it's what do you do or what is it? How are you different and who's a good fit?
Okay.
And then part of the gimmick behind this is that it's 3 questions with a max of 3 slides in a max of 3 minutes.
Okay.
Because if I give someone, I say, hey, Spencer, what is PlanSight? How is PlanSight different? Who's a good fit for PlanSight? If you only have 3 minutes to answer those 3 questions, you're going to get to the point and do it very, very quickly.
Exactly.
There's no room for fluff.
Yeah.
I saw a vendor, and I won't call them out on it, but I saw a vendor who was in kind of the mental health, well-being kind of space, meditation, stress management, whatever. Their slide deck was 50 slides long.
Yeah.
And I'm just aghast at that stuff. I was like, I cannot imagine a broker who wants to sit through a 50 slide deck on any of this stuff.
Well, even most people will be polite, though. Most people will sit through it, but they've tuned out. The retention of the information is probably near zero because you've overwhelmed them with too many data points and too many, and then you got a slide in front of them. I don't like presenting on slides because people are reading the slides rather than listening to you talk, right? And so they're all of a sudden you've kind of bifurcated their attention and they're not paying attention to you anymore.
Here's the thing I always kind of tell people when I ask about this is that think about YouTube, right? This video podcast will go on YouTube, right? YouTube has often those pre-roll or mid-roll ads, right? And sometimes they're 30 seconds, 15, whatever. But a lot of times if they're over 15 seconds, there's a little skip ad thing that'll pop up at 15 seconds. If you're I'm speaking for me personally, but I think most people think this way, that if there's an ad rolling, I have moved my cursor and I'm waiting for that skip ad thing to go.
Yeah.
So it's like if you are so impatient that you don't want to watch a 15-second ad, why do you think they want to sit through your 30-minute 50-slide presentation?
Yeah.
And the whole idea from the broker perspective is if I can watch a video that is 3 questions, 3 slides, 3 minutes, I can then decide where to invest my time. So part of what we built this virtual exhibit hall that's available at BenefitsAlly.com, where all of these 3x3x3 videos are there. Every video has a very short description. So you can scroll through there and read a very short description on a program and go, hey, is that interesting? Does it look interesting? Is it not? If it does, I know the video is going to be 2 minutes and 28 seconds, and I'm going to get what, how, who in under 3 minutes.
Yeah.
The other reason we like doing it this way, a lot of the videos we did in the past, and is, you know, a lot of guys do these like animated videos or explainer videos, and some of them are better than others, but a lot of them, they're too generic. It's like, oh, you know, we're all about customer service. We're all about transparency. We're all about helping solve the healthcare crisis. Didn't say anything, right? This forces them. It's like, you better say something and make it compelling, because if it's too generic or not compelling, guess what? When that broker watches it, they're like, who cares? Yep. Click, close, done. The other reason I like doing these video interviews is it's all about radical transparency. It's easy to make a ridiculous claim in a one-on-one presentation that you're not going to get called out on. When it's your face making a ridiculous claim or making some claim for the entire world to see, you're going to be, you know, you're a little bit more cautious about, if I say something, I know other people are going to see it. And there are people out there that are not afraid to call people on, you know, some ridiculous claims on LinkedIn or whatever. So it's all about radical transparency. And to me, it's about, tell your story, what, how, who, 3 minutes, 3 slides, and it's on you to make sure that story is compelling. If I'm a broker, whether I'm a boutique guy, large national, whatever, if I'm not interested in 2 minutes, why do I want to talk to this guy for 30?
That's right. No, I love that. You know, I think from my approach, right, we talked about beforehand what gets engagement for the promotion of the podcast, or what gets engagement on LinkedIn. Like, I've seen it. Probably 10 to 20x engagement on a picture with text versus a video. And, you know, probably another 10 to 20x of the clip of the video versus the long form version of it. But I think they all also kind of complement each other. You're going to find the people that'll just engage with the picture and like it, right? Or comment on it. Then you're going to find people that'll watch the clip and go, that's interesting. Then you'll find people that watch the clip and go to the full thing. What you're doing is segmenting yourself and saying, hey, 3x3x3 is short enough to grab your attention or not. And if it does grab your attention, here's the person you need to talk to for the full version of that presentation. But it gets to that point a lot faster and probably filters out the people that are not appropriate for it.
It filters it out that they're not appropriate. You're right. Because you don't want to, if I'm a group rep or a rep, I don't want to spend 30 minutes on a phone call with someone and figure out after 30 minutes they're not a good fit.
Exactly.
That's a waste of everybody's time at that point. Here in that video, by answering the what, how, who, if someone's reaching out, they've already kind of pre-qualified themselves to say, I get what you do. I work in this segment. I would like to have a conversation with you. And if I'm a rep for that vendor, that's a more valuable conversation. And a lot of it for us is also about kind of trying to make it easy, right? This is also one of the comments from brokers is everybody is so busy. Like, I want to try to make this stuff super simple, easy use, whether it's mobile friendly, even like, and this came up from a vendor a while back. They're like, well, Chris, if someone wants more information, why don't you make them fill out a form? Because that way we can track where this came from, you know? And I was like, I don't want to do a form, because if I'm a busy broker, one of my biggest, I have a lot of pet peeves, but like one of the things that I don't like is if I want more information and you make me fill out a form and there are like 9 required fields, I'm like, why do you need to know my zip code? Why do you really want to know like how many employees I have? Like, it's just, you're creating barriers for that person's, like, if they're on the fence about whether this is interesting or not, they're like, I'm done. I'm not that interested.
Your point is well taken. When I follow somebody's Calendly link and then they have to fill out 10 questions when they're said like, hey, click here, I want to talk to you, but do my Calendly, and then I've got to go like, I've got to describe my business and who I am, and it's like, we just talk. Like, just let me get to the point of clicking your Calendly so we can get at something on the calendar if that's your preferred method to book it. But don't make me fill out a huge form in order to do that. And we already know each other already anyways. It's kind of silly.
And the way we do it too, for those of you that have visited the website, there in any of our videos on our virtual exhibit hall, there's a button that literally says more information. And you can click that on your phone, tablet, email, and all it does is will open up your email, whether it's Gmail, Outlook, Mail on your app, and it will pre-populate an email address. Spencer at PlanSite, John Doe at whatever. So you can send an email. You can type in whatever subject line you want. You say, hey, please call me. I need pricing. And you send me a quote. Can you send me a flyer? Like, it's one click and you can type whatever message you want. and go.
Yeah.
And it's just, to me, it's about how do we make this simple and easy. And the other reason, this is a side note, the reason we like doing the 3x3x3s, and this is a new thing we started doing. Every video that we put together is transcribed. I don't know if you guys transcribe your videos.
I know I do clips sometimes, but the transcription, you know, it's just either an added expense or you need software for it, and I haven't ventured down that path yet.
Just side note for anybody who wants to do
I want to know, but
transcription,
please.
I use Rev, R-E-V.
Okay.
You can do transcription or closed captions. I think it's like $1.25 a minute. So it's an expense. It's not crazy. Mine are 3 minutes, so yours
I got a $60 to $75
to transcribe. But we transcribe it, and we do it for two reasons. One, you post on LinkedIn, you want to, if someone doesn't want to unmute it and listen, they can read along.
Yeah.
But we also put the transcription in the notes of the video, in the booth in the virtual exhibit hall.
Okay.
And the reason we do it that way, you know, a lot of the programs, and I'll use PlanSight as an example, a lot of these really cool tools almost they defy categorization. Like, I don't know how you would define. We're that the category is still being created. RFP technology is probably the simplest way to put it. One.
Yeah.
But it's brutal. There are a lot of things that just defy categorization, or they're across multiple categories or whatever. So the way we said is that there are no categories on our site. It's a lie. There are categories on group size. So every vendor basically says, what size group do you work with, the who, you can filter by that. But there's a search box, just like Google. And you can type in any word you can think of. Transparency, TPA, PBM, RFP, whatever. And whatever word you search for, if that word shows up, if that word is uttered by any vendor in any one of those 3x3 videos, that video will pop up.
Okay, interesting.
So to me, it's all about simplicity and ease of use. And again, just respecting these guys' time. It's like, I'm looking for something in this space, type in, kick out the 8 results. And this is going to sound weird from somebody who has a site you're trying to drive traffic to. I want you to come to my site, but I want you to spend the least amount of time on my site as possible to find what you need and then get out. By making the site more complicated, can we add more features? Maybe, but I'm all about simplicity. Did you ever read Blink by Malcolm Gladwell?
Yeah, actually,
I think it was Blink.
Blink, yeah.
I think it was in Blink. It's been so long since I read it. But one of the comments is this overwhelming abundance of choice thing, this kind of analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
I think Paint Store was one of the examples he might have given in the book. It's like, I want to paint my walls, beige or whatever. And there's 400 shades of beige at Sherwin-Williams. It's like, oh my God, I just want to, I just want, That
brings back like visceral memories. My wife's putting like colors on the wall and they're all 3 different shades. And I'm like, they all look exactly the same. What are you talking about? Yeah.
So it's just that kind of overwhelming analysis of stuff. So.
I think I'm glad you brought up Blink. I remember reading that. And, I think Blink, some of the premises was like, hey, people can make sophisticated decisions in a blink of an eye because, you can go really deep and spend an hour looking at whether or not this statue is a real statue or a fake. Or experts can look at it and just something in their intuition says, yep, that's fake or that's real. And so it's like using your intuition to make a split-second decision, but it's actually an educated decision at the same time. Yeah.
Well, and that's also the idea behind kind of the 3x3 with having a live person. It's like, I'm hearing this person's voice. I can see their eyes. I can hear their voice. There's kind of an intuitive trust factor. Like this person knows what they're talking about, or they have no clue what they're talking about. And I don't want to waste my time kind of talking
about
that's
what, I stress this all the time, but it's like, companies need to let their people, especially their salespeople, be themselves, have their own identity. Andy, of course, stresses this all the time.
Sure.
Those companies are renting people's brands, and it is true to a degree, but it's like, let them be themselves. Like, I want people to know me. If they're going to do business with PlanSight and it's going to come through me, it's probably a good idea that they kind of know who I am and what I stand for, to give them the, immediately, if I talk to Spencer, I hate third person, but if they talk to me, it's like they know what they're going to get from a personality perspective, kind of a belief system, who I am, how I operate, how I speak, all those things. And so there's a softening of like, oh, who is this guy? I'm gonna cross my arms and he's got to convince me to listen to him. Like, more than likely, they're already going to want to listen to me. And then that way I can talk about PlanSight in a way that doesn't have a guard up, which is, it's really fascinating, as a salesperson, seeing that evolution of that happen. But let people be themselves, man. Let your people actually have an identity that work for you.
100%. And this is one of, shout out to Stephen Connolly at Gistio. He did some animated videos, and I don't do as many animated videos anymore. If you need an animated explainer video, Stephen Connolly at Gistio is awesome. And one of the things, some of the best piece of advice he gave me. So in the early days of BenefitsAlly, we did these like animated cartoon style videos. A lot of people still do. And he also has a really great sense of humor. And one of the things there was, I think this was the example, but we had a video and we had like it was Ben at BenefitsAlly, right? And it was a little animated cartoon guy. And the video opened with the cartoon character animated knocking on the monitor and had like a glass nose, like he was banging on a window.
Yeah.
And when we first animated that, I was like, Steven, that's like cheeky and funny, but like, I want to be like serious. Like, you're trying to exude professionalism. And he was like, I get it. But he said, here's the thing. You can play it safe and be like everyone else, but then it's like, okay, I don't like this guy. I don't hate this guy, but he's also not memorable. Like, would you rather have a video that 98% of people are like, that's nice? Or would you rather have a video that 50% of people love and 50% hate?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, yes, you're going to have 50% of people who hate it, but you're going to have 50% of people who love this. Are going to go, this is awesome, Chris. I want to talk to you. And that is so much better than having 98% of people that are like, it's nice.
I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, it's as soon as they click off, they don't remember who you are.
Fine.
Mark Combs, you know him at Self-Insured.
Oh, sure.
Reporting.
Where he's the wrestler thing.
His wrestler thing, and then he had the one where he's had this big marlin, like a fish, like it was a blow-up fish,
yep.
And it's like slowly zooming out, and he's got this like background behind him, a green screen, and he's talking to like Dwayne or somebody that's like off screen. It's like, this was your idea, but it was like, you didn't even really, at the end of the day, ultimately know a whole lot about what it was.
What
but
Self-Insured Reporting
so
is.
damn funny, and it just came across as like absolutely. I actually looked one day. I think that YouTube video has like hundreds of thousands of views. I may be overstating it, but it was an astronomical amount of views for a guy that has selfinsuredreporting.com. But it was such funny and good and memorable content that immediately everybody just kind of latched onto it. And that's a great example. Is like, you can be silly, you can be funny, you can be kind of dumb and tongue in cheek, and all of a sudden he's stood out from this ocean of kind of generic and bland content.
Well, and that's part of it. I mean, I may do some, getting my hair is obviously, we were joking earlier, my hair is a lot longer. I may do some I don't know what
Can you do a hair flip for me before we get
yeah, you want to do like a little
there you go. Yeah, we'll do a slow motion of that.
I was joking with my brother-in-law. We went tubing in the Frio River, and we did like the water, like slow hair flip stuff like that.
You get up there and
like the shaking of the hair. But yeah, I mean, I think part of it, and and this is why I love doing the 3x3s, and I'm sure why you love doing the podcast is people get to know you. They see your face, and I think ultimately where I want to go, and I think we're getting there with BenefitsAlly, but I want to reach the point where there are a lot of brokers that know that, hey, I'm not going to waste your time. You're going to walk away smarter. If I'm calling you saying, hey, I've got something you need to hear about, there are a lot of guys that will call me back, no questions asked, like, Chris, I trust you that if you say, and I'm not saying it's the greatest program in the world, but it's something worth knowing about. Yeah. You want to create that trust and credibility where when you pick up the phone and call someone, they're like, okay, Chris, it sounds good.
I'm going to take this call.
Take the call, and this goes back to my early sales training at Dell and kind of being personal on the phone. But it also goes back to, and this is just kind of a separate side note and tip that I tell kind of vendors all the time, when I cold call people, if I cold call brokers, number one, I buy Zoom Info, which has direct dial phone numbers, which are helpful.
Okay.
So even though I do make direct dial phone calls, which people are like, why is the sales rep cold calling me? But brokers do actually pick up their phone. I see a lot more for anybody selling to brokers who's watching this.
Yeah.
I see way more success getting meetings versus doing email or LinkedIn messaging. Okay. Because email and LinkedIn messaging, there's so many automated tools out there to blast them out there, and it's easy to delete. When they pick up the phone, you're catching that guy live. But, and here's the big thing, when they pick it up live, you got to be direct, compelling, and do it quickly. So it's like, hey, man, it's Chris Fisher, BenefitsAlly. Here's, I know I caught you off guard. We're doing something cool. I'm coming to town, or I'm doing this. Here's what these guys do in 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And if this sounds interesting, let's schedule a time to talk. I don't want to take 30 minutes of your time right now. It's here's what we're doing in 20 seconds or 15 seconds. And be a man or woman of your word, right? And this was pounded in my head early on. If a meeting is 20 minutes, when it hits 20 minutes, I will literally say, we are out of time. I am happy to keep talking if you want to keep talking. Otherwise, I am out of here because we booked this for 20 minutes. But I'm shocked how many times we get meetings off cold calls. But I think part of the reason is I'm very direct and brief and to the point. And that kind of goes back to the 3x3x3 thing. We worked with a vendor recently, and they've got a really compelling story to tell. But the problem was the compelling part of their value prop was buried on slide like 14. So it took like 9 minutes to get to the meat and potatoes of it. And my feedback to the CEO of the company was, you are making a dangerous assumption that they're still paying attention in slide 14. Like, why, you know, you're laying all this groundwork to this, and you're assuming that everything you're saying before is so compelling, they're going to be riveted, going, oh my God, I can't more, like, what's the next slide going to be? This is so exciting.
Yeah.
Don't. Like, if that's a one piece of advice I could give to any vendors that are listening to the call is, you know, get your story out quickly, make it compelling, because you're making a dangerous assumption they're going to pay attention long enough to get to the exciting part of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And you know, I do want to ask the question, right? Even though you kind of summed it up, like, future of this, but kind of what do you want people to leave this conversation thinking about, other than what you just stated? Let's wrap this up. You mentioned being on time. We've got about 2 minutes left of your time. So let's I'll give you the floor, whatever you want to leave everybody with, and then also obviously how to get a hold of you as well.
Yeah. So I mean, I think more than anything else is just for the benefit advisors, anybody that's listening out there, there's so much cool stuff happening in employee benefits, but we're all busy. Just get to the point, right? You know, I think the idea that people, you know, want to, you know, just add value and do it quickly. If you're a benefit advisor looking for new, interesting ideas, you can find me on LinkedIn. I got an old profile shot. I need to update it with the
you got to get those locks
current
on
locks.
Yeah.
I might do a little funny animated thing like that, but you can find me on LinkedIn if we're not connected. Feel free to check out BenefitsAlly.com. We got a ton of 3x3x3 videos out there. It's free to check out. There's no registration required, no sign up. And if you're a vendor that's doing something interesting, you're like, hey, I want to, you know, I'd like to have my 3x3x3 video put together to tell our story. Please reach out. You can email me at cfisher@benefitsally.com. You can call me at 832-526-8357. It's all on LinkedIn. But I sincerely appreciate the time. I love what you're doing. You're self-funded with Spencer. Early whiteboard video days. I don't know if it was you or Dr. Bricker doing those early on.
I don't know. I think he either did it first, but he's definitely doing it best. Like, let's give him credit for that.
Your whiteboard videos that early on were fantastic. These are fantastic as well, and I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Hey, thanks for coming, man. Thanks for your time. Great insights. Really, just, you know, obviously really well spoken and tell your story really well. So it was a joy, man, and I hope to be able to do it again sometime soon.
Anytime. Thanks, Spencer.
Thanks, Chris.